In Mirau, northern Germany, Charlotte spies on her brother signing paperwork for her arranged marriage. So she pushes a statue in frustration. The following day, she rides a carriage with her brother Adolphus to meet her new husband, King George, the King of England and Ireland. Charlotte is smart and quick-witted. She protests to this arranged marriage. Adolphus explains to her that they are but a mere province in Germany and had no choice in the matter. They simply had to follow what the British Empire wanted. In the present day, in the middle of the night, the grown Queen Charlotte is woken up by news that her daughter has died during childbirth. The future of the monarch is at stake now that the Princess Royal has died. Queen Charlotte has 13 children, but not a single legitimate royal heir out of her grandkids. In the past, the young Charlotte is observed by Princess Augusta, the mother of King George. She comments that Charlotte has great hips for childbearing. Later, Princess Augusta complains to the council that Charlotte is very brown. Lord Bute wonders if the marriage agreement can be cancelled because people will talk about Charlotte's skin color. However, Princess Augusta says they can't simply cancel the wedding, and they'll just have to normalize this interracial marriage by inviting more of Charlotte's kind to the wedding, which is in 6 hours. So, the royal court invites a bunch of black people and Asians. Meanwhile, Agatha Danbury is getting uncomfortably plowed by her much older husband. He says he has a surprise for her, but suddenly falls asleep. Agatha takes this time to get the hell out of there. Her maid Coral gives her the good news that Agatha is invited to the royal wedding, and Agatha is actually going to be part of Charlotte's court. Agatha is shocked at this revelation because usually their race aren't allowed to intermingle. Guests start to arrive for the wedding. Agatha dons her best gown and enters the scene with her much older husband. Princess Augusta goes to the guests and starts giving them new titles. She starts off with Agatha Danbury and her husband, giving them title Lady and Lord Danbury. Agatha is very pleased about this. Later, Brimsley starts to panic because Charlotte is missing. Agatha sees Charlotte trying to sneak away. In the garden, Charlotte tries to use a trellis of plants to climb up the wall. A man interrupts her and wonders if she needs help and why she's trying to run away. Charlotte admits that she's running away because no one is telling her what King George looks like, so he must obviously look but ugly. The man introduces himself as King George and Charlotte is dumbfounded. When Charlotte tries to bow in politeness, George grabs her hand. He explains that it's not his fault he was born a king and hopes that Charlotte can just see him as George. He compliments Charlotte's beauty, then talks about himself so that Charlotte can get to know him better. The king is very interested in science and especially in astrology. Before departing for the wedding, he kisses her hand farewell. By the end of it, Charlotte definitely wants to marry the hunk. At the wedding, Charlotte is walked down the aisle by her brother. King George and his mother are absolutely overjoyed. George's half of the wedding party isn't as excited about a black woman joining their court though. The two kiss and make their marriage official. After the festivities, Lady Danbury introduces herself to Charlotte. She wants Charlotte to be careful of the people in court. Then, George brings Charlotte to her new house. She's pleased by the grandness of it all, but is shocked to find out that George will be staying elsewhere. As he's about to leave, Charlotte says they should spend the night together. George hesitantly and angrily agrees. However, Charlotte protests that she doesn't want to if he behaves like this. Eventually, George screams at her because he is king and he wants to leave her here to go to his estate in Kew. Charlotte apologizes because she thought King George was simply George. She goes back to formalities and asks to be excused. As Charlotte walks away, Brimsley follows her as a loyal servant. The show transitions into present day, with Brimsley following suit. Queen Charlotte walks into a room of all her children. The queen berates her children for not fornicating enough to create legitimate heirs to the throne. She wonders if the men are putting it in the right hole. Before leaving, she reminds them that she made 15 royal babies with King George, and all they need is one child. The show transitions back to young Charlotte, who says she should have gone over the wall. In a room full of old white men, Augusta says giving titles that look like the new queen is indeed a great experiment. Lord Bute thinks it's not so great. Lord Bute says they need to make sure the king and queen consummate their marriage in order for this great experiment to have legitimacy. Meanwhile, Queen Charlotte spends her days alone without the king in her new mansion. She's with a ton of servants though. She studies astrology on her spare time. The loneliness eventually leads to her screaming in boredom. One night, Charlotte gets so bored that she decides to visit her husband's estate. Upon her arrival, a butler named Reynolds tells Charlotte that the king is in the observatory. While Charlotte looks for the king, Reynolds invites Brimsley into his quarters for some alone time. The two have a passionate sword fight. During the deed, Brimsley wonders if King George is impotent, has deformities or is gay. Reynolds assures him that King George's eggplant is quite large and to his knowledge, the king likes women. Meanwhile, Charlotte finds King George looking at the stars. George invites her over to look at the stars with him. However, Charlotte is annoyed that George has preferred to look at the stars over spending time with her. The two get into a heated argument, leading to George telling Charlotte to go home. The next day, Augusta asks the butlers if the newlywed royal couple have consummated their marriage. The two lie and say the king and queen definitely did some Netflix and chillin'. Subsequently, Lord Danbury is currently burying himself into Lady Danbury. Then Lady Danbury vents to Coral about how her husband was denied entry to the gentleman's club. Apparently, Lord Danbury so desperately wants to be accepted by the White Royals, but Lady Danbury could care less about their approval. Then, Brimsley convinces Reynolds to have the king do a grand gesture for the queen in order to help consummate their marriage. The king decides to give Charlotte a small dog, but she's not amused by its tiny size. She walks away dejectedly. One day, the queen invites Lady Danbury to tea. Lady Danbury eases the queen into telling the truth about not consummating her marriage. Lady Danbury tells her that Charlotte's position as the queen is in danger since Charlotte never actually did the hanky-panky. Lady Danbury warns her that it wasn't too long ago that queens were beheaded for not being able to bear children, and this is an important part of her role as queen. It's also important since this is the first time a black woman is part of the royal family. In the present, the two talk about how Queen Charlotte is having trouble getting her children to make grandbabies. Charlotte has invited Violet Bridgerton to call upon her expertise, since she has many children who are married. Violet says it's easy to get her kids to marry when they're in love. Charlotte protests that her kids are in love, but with commoners, whores, and married women. There are currently 50 illegitimate babies. The three women all discuss how they view marriage since they've all had different experiences. Lady Danbury says marriage is but a duty, not a pleasure. The queen decides she will just order her kids into arranged marriages. She orders Brimsley to make her a long list of potential brides. However, Violet doesn't think this will work the way the queen intends it to. Later, Augusta calls on Agatha Danbury to tell her why she visited the queen. Lady Danbury doesn't reveal much. Instead, she reminds Augusta to call her Lady Danbury, since that is the title she was given by her. Lady Danbury uses this opportunity to get ahead in society by trading information for equality. Lady Danbury wants her husband to be invited by the Whites, to be able to go hunting with them, and to get the nicest seats at the opera. One day, King George and the Queen have dinner together. They end the night looking through his telescope seeing the planet Venus. Charlotte finally realizes why George is so obsessed with his observatory. The two make out and George decides to pack his things to go home with the Queen. The staff gets her ready for her special adult time with the king. When they finally meet in his bedchambers, the two ride each other like horses. Subsequently, Brimsley and Reynolds do the same. The next morning, the Danburys arrive in their new home gifted by Augusta. Lady Danbury pretends she had nothing to do with it. At George's estate, Augusta is wondering if George has consummated his marriage. George yells at his mother saying that he has done his duty even though he had no passion for it. Unbeknownst to them, Charlotte has been listening in on their conversation. She feels used and manipulated because she thought George had real passionate feelings for her. Later, King George almost collapses. He asks Reynolds to fetch the doctor and to make sure Charlotte never finds out about his condition. Much later, Brimsley finds the king being looked at by a doctor. He asks Reynolds 21 questions, but Reynolds doesn't give him any information. We are introduced to a young Violet Bridgerton, known as Violet Ledger before she was married. Her mother Vivian is racist and her father Lord Ledger adores her. Vivian says the blacks will never be their equals and it doesn't matter that there is a black queen now. However, Vivian proves to her mother that they are equals, and in some regards, Lady Danbury is better than them. Princess Augusta invites Lady Danbury over for some tea for Lady Danbury to spill some tea on the royal couple. Lady Danbury says the couple is happier now that the day of coronation draws near. The couple is crowned and they get a major applause from the crowd. As soon as the door closes, the couple stops the charade and lets go of each other's hand. Charlotte vents to Lady Danbury about their sham of a marriage. On the other hand, Lady Danbury lies to Augusta about the royal couple's happy marriage. However, their marriage is a little more complicated as it seems. The two argue about fulfilling their duties to have a child, but when they get into the bedroom to do it, they are animals and very passionate for each other. Charlotte tells Danbury she absolutely despises the king, but in a hateful passion. The two get it on at the dinner table in front of all the servants. One day, Brimsley accidentally reveals to Charlotte that the king has been seeing a doctor. and that is why he doesn't host social events. After doing it with the king, Charlotte wonders if he's sick. George lies and says he is not. Later, Lady Danbury asks Augusta if she can host the first ball to unite the whites and blacks. Augusta says she cannot allow this. However, Lady Danbury warns Augusta that she is the only connection to the Queen's secrets. Augusta says she will ask Lord Bute. At night, Lady Danbury just lays there motionless, while her husband finishes up. Lady Danbury tells him that Augusta was not enthusiastic about them hosting the ball. Lord Danbury says this is exactly what they like to do, dangle the carrot in front of them, never being able to reach the prize. Later, Lady Danbury decides to send out the invitations for the ball even before Augusta sends her approval. Vivian shrieks in shock when she receives the invitation. Vivian refuses to go to their home because they're black. Violet wishes she could go, but she is currently not old enough to attend a ball. Later at Charlotte's estate, Vivian tells Lady Danbury that she will not be able to attend the ball. She has the other white girls agree that they too will be missing it. Charlotte, on the other hand, is too busy looking at her husband to see what sort of secret he's hiding. At night, Lord Bute is angry that Princess Augusta has allowed Lady Danbury to send out invitations. He claims no one is going, and Vivian is leading the charge to protest against it. Lord Bute tells Augusta to have Lady Danbury cancel the ball. The next day, Lady Danbury tries to get a preoccupied Charlotte to make the other ladies attend the ball. Charlotte is too worried about her husband though, and Lady Danbury snaps her out of it, saying that Charlotte's position in the world is really important. She has a bigger job to help solidify other black women's place in the world. She begins to understand her position as queen and her duty to her people. One night after the royal couple do it, Charlotte convinces George to help Lady Danbury with the ball. With his help, even Vivian Ledger attends the ball. Lord Ledger asks Lord Danbury to join him on one of their hunts someday. At the ball, the two races don't intermingle. When the king and queen arrive though, Lord Ledger begins to dance with Lady Danbury. Vivian looks displeased, but everyone begins to intermingle. Princess Augusta even notes how she's never seen her son this happy. After the ball, Lord Danbury wants to celebrate their success by doing it, but Lady Danbury doesn't look too happy about that. When she's doing doggy style with him, Lord Danbury suddenly falls to his death. Lady Danbury celebrates with Coral. Then she goes back inside to pretend to scream over the death of her husband. In the present day, Lady Danbury vents to Violet that she loathed her husband. Lord Danbury only saw women as something to breed. He said women should not be educated. So to spite him, Lady Danbury helps fund orphan girls to attend school. Subsequently, Queen Charlotte tasks Brimsley why none of her girls ever married. Brimsley says it's because Charlotte's daughters simply didn't want to leave her alone with the sick king. Back in the past, Charlotte hears a noise in the middle of the night. She finds George saying nonsense while etching random things on the walls. He starts to rush outside while Charlotte follows. He exclaims that he sees Venus and he is here for her. He removes all his clothes and starts screaming at the planet, while Reynolds tries to get him back inside. Charlotte starts to realize the gravity of the situation and how her husband's mind melts into nothingness. This is just part 1 of the series. Would you like us to cover the last part?
Subscribe for more videos like this. Turn on notifications and leave a like. It really helps the channel.